Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we've got two cards to talk about, of course, the new Produce SSR for May, as well as the new Support SSR for Chiyuki. Keep in mind that both May and Chiyuki are permanent, especially because the fact that this banner does not have a spark to it means, yes, they are permanent. So you'll be able to get these cards in the near future, either on the next banner or maybe in free pulls. You never know. So, let's go ahead and talk about what exactly is going on with these cards. But of course, we also have to appreciate the animations for what they are. I think these are pretty okay. May's Fest's animation feels surprisingly toned down compared to a lot of the stuff they've been trying to do. But maybe that's just me. Either way. May starts out as a visual unit and upgrades into a vocal unit after she reaches 3 stars. Her appeals, first is a visual 3.0 that follows up with a visual 30% buff for 3 turns, and applies a vocal dance visual 10% buff for 4 turns, but this also reduces your current mental by 20%. The upgraded version of the appeal is a vocal 4.5 that applies a 60% vocal buff for 3 turns, a 20% buff to vocal dance and visual for 4 turns, and applies the same 20% current mental reduction. Both appeals have the same Link appeal, which is a vocal dance visual 30% buff for 5 turns. The idea is relatively simple. May is meant to be, yet again, another enabler for Straylight strategies that need to consume buffs in order to become strong. Just off of one of these appeals, you're getting at least 2 buffs of each attribute, and a third in either visual or vocal, should you choose to use the Link appeal version. Otherwise, you just cut down that number by 1 each. For her passives, she only actually has one that is particularly relevant. A vocal visual 75% up if your mental is 74% or lower, which has a 20% chance to activate twice. She does have a second 2-star passive, which is a vocal 40% up if it's turn 3 or later, which has a 20% chance to activate twice. These are okay. I'm not sure why Straylight is necessarily leaning into the revenge style that they're not typically known for. This is usually an Antika thing. I think it's neat because it opens up some synergy ideas for utilizing Antika supports. But hopefully this is not another one of those thrown at a dartboard kind of ideas and they're just going to drop it immediately after this card. So I want to see where they're going with this. Just to throw that out there. Her memory appeal, when maxed out, is a vocal dance visual 30% buff for 5 turns that links into 2 appeals. The first is a vocal 3.0 scaling based on how many vocal and dance buffs you can remove, and a visual 2.0 appeal that scales based on how many visual buffs you remove. Remember that the maximum for both of these is 4, so it's much less likely you're going to be able to max out the visual version of that appeal, or rather the visual component of that appeal. The vocal one should not be too difficult since you're working off of 2 individual stats. So if we go back to her appeals, the vocal appeal should realistically, if you Link appeal with it, give you enough to max out the damage for it, since you would remove 2 and 2 plus the additional vocal. So that part's already good. The visual would need a little bit of extra help. It's okay. The problem with splitting it in half is that now you're having to work on 2 different damage sources, which means you're calculating it with 2 different stats, and unless they're both the same, or in this case, visual has a bit more of a bias to it, it's gonna feel kinda underwhelming. So overall, I would say that May is interesting. I wouldn't necessarily say good. Implementing more mental reduction into Straylight isn't exactly what I expected. So again, I really do want to see where they're going with this. She's useful in the sense that she sets up Straylight fairly well through her appeals, but that's more or less it. Not having a 4-star passive also seems really odd for a permanent SSR, and I really hope that that is not a feature going forward. Her overall output for most teams is going to feel a little low. She's kind of strict with her enabling as well anyway. Not every team necessarily wants to stack a ton of buffs, so how you play into that with your supports is going to be really important too. She's definitely playable, so I'm going to say that she's at least a B-, but I think you could definitely do a lot better with any of your particular choices if you are looking to use a May card. Though the story is nice, from what I've seen. Moving in next, we have Chiyuki. Chiyuki is a pure vocal unit and has a lot of interesting things going on with her, but I don't necessarily think that they're fantastic unless you are specifically playing Alstro. First, let's take a look at her masteries. She has a couple unique ones. The first then is Room Mastery, which reaches +6 at level 75. Notably, it's also +4 at level 65 and +2 at level 30. So if you want a reasonable amount of this, you're going to need at least 1 additional copy, and if you want the best version of it, you need 3 additional copies. She has Vocal Stay Mastery, which goes up to a +3 at level 70, +2 at level 55. So you'll need at least 2 copies, or rather 2 additional copies from the first one, in order to get that maxed out. And then lastly, she has Unit Mastery Vocal, which reaches +8 at level 80, +5 at level 75, and +2 at level 65. So no matter what, you're going to have additional copies of this Chiyuki in order to access this mastery in the first place. These are all pretty okay. Room Mastery is growing increasingly popular because of Step. Vocal Stay Mastery for the same reason. These two skills work incredibly well together. And Unit Mastery Vocal is fine, and is maybe the weakest of the 3. In fact, it absolutely is the weakest of the 3. But it's still okay when you consider that it is a +16 if you're running all of Alstroemeria together. Now, outside of this, we also then have her Appeal, which is a Vocal 3.0 that follows up with a Vocal 2.0 that scales based on how much of your current mental you have. So it's a 2.0 if you're at 100%, a 1.6 if you're at 87%, and it drops as you go. The lowest is at if you are at least at half health, where it becomes a 0.4. For many teams, having access to a Vocal 5.0 on turn 1 is okay. I actually think that this is a reasonable pickup for players that just need a strong appeal and don't have any of the super crazy limited cards just yet. If you're able to max out this Chiyuki at some point in time, hanging on to this appeal for a nice turn 1 burst is not the worst thing you could be doing. For her passives, the only real notable one is her 2-star passive, which is a Vocal 100% up if you have 6 or more healing instances during that performance. So that means that any source of healing applies a separate case of that healing instance. So regen gets you 1 stack of the 6 for every turn that you are healed by it. The same for instantaneous healing counts as 1, healing appeals count as 1, or however many depending on the effect. So as long as you can get 6 of those, you can access this Vocal 100% passive. I feel like that's going to be really difficult for most teams, especially considering that Chiyuki herself does not provide you any source of healing. This means you're going to have to invest into either an Alstroemeria support lineup, or specifically be playing Alstroemeria in order to access this passive at all. So I think she's going to be a little harder to splash onto vocal teams that aren't Alstroemeria, which means that she's okay, but she's not going to be super crazy like the cards that can just work on every team while also having really good masteries. So I'm going to give Chiyuki a reasonable B- if you are not using her on Alstroemeria, B+ if you are. She's definitely not the strongest piece of Alstroemeria support we've had, especially because I think if you're going to go super hard on the idea of we're focusing on one team, you're used on one team, then I feel like you need to raise the incentive for using that one team, as opposed to making it kind of average with everything else. At least that's how I would view it. She does seem pretty solid overall outside of this, and can maybe find some niche use outside of Alstro due to the masteries just facilitating good stat growth. So, we will just simply have to see how players are going to use her. I don't think she's going to be popping up in the top 100 anytime soon, but I do think that she is an okay addition to most players, especially if you are running Vocal Alstroemeria. So that'll do it for the video today. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it and share it around for people that are maybe just getting into shiny colors as we're coming off of the 5th anniversary, and maybe you're trying to get a little more in tune with what cards are doing in this game. Maybe you're getting into the game because you saw Shiny Song, the upcoming rhythm game for shiny colors, and wanted to see what the original game is all about, or maybe learn more about how the game functions. Either way, next time we'll be talking about whatever banner comes next. Had to drop this video a little early as I will be out of town for the rest of the week, so had to make sure I had this up by at least Wednesday, otherwise it wasn't going to happen at all. Till the next one, I've been Sho. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.